Hi fans of high quality entertainment. I thought today I would talk about different bands or artists the very first time I heard their music. And I might have done a similar video like this in the past, but who cares, right? So let's go with, first of all, AC/DC. I will show you the exact vinyl album I bought. It was this one. And this was, I believe it was 1977. Yes, 1977. I'd heard about them. I didn't know what they sounded like because of course back in the 70s there was no internet. I bet you didn't know that. And so it'd be kind of word of mouth, but I would mainly get my information from rock music magazines like Cream, Rolling Stone when it used to be halfway decent, and Circus magazine. So I'd read about them, and I remember bringing this up to the counter, and the woman behind the counter asked me about them, saying, "Are they pretty good?" I said, "I don't know, but I've heard they're pretty good." I took the vinyl home, and I loved it. The thing is, though, with bands like AC/DC, as much as I love their music, it's not something I come back to a lot. I mean, I don't play this very much, but it's still a great album. I think it's my favorite AC/DC album. Whole Lotta Rosie is my favorite AC/DC song. Alice Cooper. Yes. My older brother Bob bought this on vinyl, and I had two older brothers. The one older brother would never let me touch his record collection, which is fine. Everybody's different. And my other brother Bob didn't care. He just, and I tried to be careful with the records, his vinyl record collection. And I liked this right away. But at the same time, I kind of got tired of it fairly quickly. But I mean, something like Ballad of Dwight Fry is just an awesome song. And so this is a great album. And then, of course, he bought Killer, and I love that, and School's Out. So, I liked Alice Cooper. Now, I've only got one Bad Company album, or CD, but I'd like to get the other ones. These are remastered bonus tracks. And the first Bad Company album, I heard they had signed to Led Zeppelin's Swan Song, so it was kind of a big deal, even though I didn't know the band members that well, like Paul Rodgers. I guess I kind of knew he was in the band Free, but I was only familiar with All Right Now. So, yeah, I did buy that album. I'm trying to remember back, or if my brothers did, but it was me that bought it, and I really liked it. And I know they're just, your typical classic rock band, fairly pretty commercial and all that, but I always thought they were great. Paul Rodgers, great singer. The Beach Boys. I was never a huge fan. The very first Beach Boys album I remember seeing in my family, I think it was my sister's, and it was the Beach Boys Greatest Hits Volume 2. And that had one of my all-time favorite Beach Boys songs on it, In My Room. And I've got Pet Sounds, I've got their greatest hits. I've got their greatest hits, got to be careful how you say hits. And that's enough for me. I mean, I really do admire the Beach Boys. They had a lot of great songs, and Brian Wilson, of course. But that being said, they're not a favorite of mine. Now, I've talked about the Beatles before, of course. One of my first memories is being 6 years old, actually 5 years old, because it was before my birthday, and seeing them on the Ed Sullivan Show. And before seeing them on the Ed Sullivan Show, I think my sister had, I don't think there was an album. I think she had I Want to Hold Your Hand, the single. And I think she also had an album, but it wasn't by the Beatles, but it looked like it was by the Beatles. It was like a copy band of the Beatles, you know, one of those cheap albums. But I was pretty smart back then. I knew it wasn't the Beatles. And so the first vinyl album I really remember being in my life was seeing it under the Christmas tree, Christmas morning, and it was Rubber Soul. And I loved it, of course. It's too far to reach. Blue Oyster Cult. Of course, I'd read how great their second album, Tyranny and Mutation, was. So I was definitely interested. It sounded like they were a pretty cool band. And I was finally able to buy my own albums. You know, I had some money. And I bought Secret Treaties. And I remember on first listen, it was like, this isn't what I was expecting. I was kind of disappointed, but of course, I played it again and again, and I grew to really, really love it. And then I bought Tyranny and Mutation, and right away I loved that one. Although Tyranny and Mutation, I got kind of tired of quickly. And it's still not, I mean, it's a great album. Don't get me wrong, but it's just not one I need to listen to a lot. I've heard it, and it just doesn't, for me, it doesn't deserve repeat listens that often. And then, after that, I bought their debut album, Blue Oyster Cult, which I thought was not very good at all. But of course, I was wrong, because I kept playing it and I grew to love it. So, my favorite Blue Oyster Cult albums are their debut album and Secret Treaties. Don't worry, it's just the neighbors. Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band. I'd heard about Trout Mask Replica for years. The first time I heard Captain Beefheart, I think was, I don't think I heard Trout Mask Replica until after hearing him on Bongo Fury. And I grew to really love that album and his vocals and everything. And when I finally heard Trout Mask Replica, of course, like many fans of Captain Beefheart, I didn't like it too much. But I kept playing it, and I grew to really love it, except for the spoken word parts, which are not my favorite. But they're still, you know, when I do listen to the album, I listen to the whole album, and I do love it. Even though it's not my favorite Captain Beefheart album, I think Dock at the Radar Station and Bat Chain Puller are my favorite. Cream were never really in my life, except I think I borrowed it. I used to borrow these vinyl albums from a guy who I've reconnected with, like after many years, on Facebook, Terry Lloyd. He used to lend me his Grand Funk albums. And I think he let me borrow Cream Live, the very first Cream Live album, and you know, the long jams and all that, and I got into it. I really did enjoy it, but I never bought any of their albums. So, Crosby, Stills and Nash. I don't know why I did that. Let's do that again. Crosby, Stills and Nash. Now, I'm not sure who bought this. I think, one of my brothers. It might have been my brother Bob who let me play his records, because I remember playing this on vinyl. Although I used to sneak my other brother's records on and play them when he wasn't home. And one time he blamed me for playing Let It Be. He had the box set of Let It Be, you know, with the Get Back book inside it. And he accused me of playing it one day when I hadn't even touched it. But I like this. It was a magical time in a way. You know, the late 60s, early 70s, a lot of great music. I was very lucky to grow up in that time period. To say something positive about today and today's music and all that, not that I listen to anything new, today's youth are really, really lucky. They can check out any band, old or new, on Spotify or Google Play or wherever. But they are missing out on, I guess, the excitement that us older people had of buying an actual physical, vinyl record or whatever. And, a lot of Beatles fans would be sitting, like me, staring at the Sgt. Pepper album cover for, listening to the album and just staring at it for hours on end. That's right, one time I stared at Sgt. Pepper for 4.5 hours. And I went cross-eyed for 2 days. Devo. Oh my God, I love early Devo. And I think before I bought this, I saw them on Saturday Night Live, and they did Jocko Homo, and I Can't Get No Satisfaction. I'm not sure what the other song was, but in Jocko Homo, it was like I was definitely drawn to their weirdness, and so I love early Devo, all the early Devo albums. I have so much guilt over this artist because I was never a big fan, but I am now. David Bowie. I think I probably heard Space Oddity first because it became it became a hit a couple of years after it was released, I believe, in the States and Canada. And the first album I heard was, I think, Ziggy Stardust, which I really did like. But he just never connected with me like other bands and artists did. But of course, now that's totally different, and I'm catching up, which is kind of fun, because I've never heard Lodge. I've never heard a lot of his albums. But at the same time, it's kind of cool to listen to a David Bowie album like Lodger, which I've never heard before. And it's like, can you imagine if you're a huge David Bowie fan and to re-listen to something with fresh ears? That's what I'm doing right now with David Bowie, and I love a lot of his work. He is definitely in my top 10 and maybe even top 5 for artists of all time. The Doors. Once again, my brother Bob, who let me play his records, he bought this, which is considered by some Doors fans, it's not their best album, but I've always loved it. And at one time it was my favorite Doors album, but that's changed, and now I think it changes too, but I think it's either Morrison Hotel, but I think my favorite is LA Woman. And of course the Doors debut is great. Never really got into Strange Days and Waiting for the Sun, at least yet. Definitely one of my favorite artists from the 70s and 80s. For quite a long time I bought his albums, Elvis Costello. And when My Aim Is True came out, I didn't know what he sounded like. I bought the album because reading up on him in magazines. And I think at first I wasn't that, it was like okay, but of course I played it again and again. I loved it. And when his second album came out, This Year's Model, it was like, the first time I played it was like, oh my God, this, I'm sure you've done this with Elvis. Oh my God, this is the greatest album of all time. The production was much cleaner, and he had the Attractions then on that album, and what a great band. But I grew tired of it fairly quickly, but still, it is a great album. And like I said, I bought a lot of Elvis Costello albums up to Mighty Like a Rose, and then I gave up on them. Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I bought I don't know how I came across these albums, because back then I had a paper route, so maybe that was how I bought them. And the first album of theirs I bought was Pictures at an Exhibition, which I would play and play, but I just never, it never really connected with me. You know, some albums, it's like you don't like them, but you just keep playing them and thinking or hoping that you'll finally get to like it, and I just never did. And then later on, of course, brain salad surgery, that my brother that wouldn't let me touch his records would play, and I really did like that though. And Lucky Man is definitely my favorite Emerson, Lake and Palmer song. And I've definitely told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. You know, in the 60s and 70s, I'd heard about Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. I saw We're Only in It for the Money in a cutout bin in the late 60s, early 70s. I remember this kid bringing Freak Out to school, the double album, the first Mothers of Invention album. But I guess he found it on the side of the road, and it didn't have the vinyl records in it, so I guess somebody didn't like it. And just looking at the album and the weirdness of it all, it was like, I think I could like that stuff. And so in 1975, I found this vinyl album. Not, this is a CD, by the way, but I'm just saying at the time. I saw One Size Fits All in a cutout bin for like $2.99. And so I bought it, and I absolutely loved it right away and became a Frank Zappa fan. So when people ask me what album should I check out of Frank Zappa's, I would just say One Size Fits All. It's great. And then Bongo Fury was the next album I bought, and of course I loved that and became a huge fan. Yes. Genesis. I absolutely loved them, and it was my brother Don who I couldn't touch his vinyl records. But when he would play this, he was a huge fan too. I absolutely loved this, and I ended up buying it myself. And then Foxtrot and all the albums with Peter Gabriel I absolutely loved. I had mentioned my friend Terry Lloyd. He always lent me his vinyl records, and he lent me this, and I was a huge fan. And actually, come to think of it, I might have actually bought Grand Funk's live album first with my own money, because like I said, I was a paper boy. And I was a huge, they were the first band after the Beatles I became a huge fan of. And I still love all of their early albums. And I'm starting to really appreciate their later albums like Survivor, which was just like so-so back in the day. And E Pluribus Funk is amazing too. So one thing I will say for the younger viewers out there is, if there's an artist or an album by an artist that you like and you don't like a certain album, in a few years you might turn around and actually love the album, because your tastes do change, believe it or not, in some weird way. Now after Grand Funk, I don't know the exact order, but around the same time I became a band. I became a band around the same time. Just one person, but I was so talented, I became a band. No, I became a fan of Humble Pie, and this was definitely the first Humble Pie album I ever heard, and I loved it. And then Smoking came out, and I loved it. Huge fan. And I'd always heard about the Kinks. You know, there were some songs I heard, like You Really Got Me and a few others that were on the radio. And Lola, which I loved. And I think it was when I heard Lola on the radio, and I found this in a cutout bin, and I bought it, and I loved it. It's the only Kinks album that I absolutely love. I've heard other ones, but they haven't connected with me like this one has. And that's not to say I don't love their 60s singles. I do have a double CD of their great music. But just album-wise, I was never a big fan. Led Zeppelin. Here's one of their albums. I'm pretty sure it was Led Zeppelin 2 that I heard first. I remember seeing Led Zeppelin 1, you know, in the drugstore. They actually used to sell vinyl records at one point. I remember seeing that. But I'm pretty sure it was Led Zeppelin 2 I heard first, and I was hooked right away. I mean, come on, Led Zeppelin 2. And I've talked about this before, once again, in a cutout bin. I'd heard about him through the years and, you know, in magazines. Never knew what he sounded like, so I bought Coney Island Baby. And I remember I was hooked right away because the very first song, Crazy Feeling, he kind of goes off key in the first, when he starts singing. It was like, I like this guy, he's real. And that's it for now. I'll do one other video if this gets enough comments and views. Otherwise, forget it, okay? So leave comments below. And I'll do the second half of the alphabet with some of the, and maybe I've skipped over a couple too. I'll get back to you on that one. Anyway, that's it for now. I'd love your comments, you know, some of your favorite bands. What was your memory of the first time you bought one of their albums or whatever? And, you know, some albums that you bought that you absolutely did not like at all, but you grew to love. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.